The night wrapped around Allwell's small hut like a thick blanket, heavy and still. As the village clock struck midnight, her eyes flew open, but her body refused to move. An invisible weight pressed down on her chest, her arms, her legs, everything. She tried to cry out, but her voice remained trapped in her throat. Through her window, moonlight cast strange shadows on her walls. The beautiful dress she had bought that day hung in the corner, its fabric seeming to shift and move in the dim light. Owl's thoughts drifted to her late mother, who had worn something similar years ago. The memory should have brought comfort, but tonight it only added to her growing unease. Hours crept by like years. Owl lay frozen, her mind racing, but her body betraying her. She could hear the soft breathing of her visiting twin cousins in the next room, could smell the lingering aroma of their celebratory dinner, but she remained helpless, a prisoner in her own body. When dawn finally broke, the invisible bonds holding her dissolved as suddenly as they had appeared. Owl sat up, her heart pounding against her ribs. She touched her arms, her face, ensuring she had truly regained control. But as she looked around her familiar room, something felt different. Something had changed during those dark hours, though she couldn't say what. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was that this strange night would be only the beginning. Her beautiful new dress, hanging innocently in the corner, held secrets darker than the midnight that had just passed. And somewhere in the village, an old woman was already waiting, knowing exactly what would unfold in the days to come. Just days earlier, Alwell had walked to the village market with hope in her heart and her father's money carefully tucked in her pocket. Christmas was coming, and for the first time since her mother's passing, she felt truly excited about the holiday. The market buzzed with life, traders calling out prices, children weaving between stalls, and the smell of roasted corn floating on the breeze. She made her way to the used clothing section, where piles of colorful fabrics stretched across wooden tables. All was practical and new clothes were expensive, and the thrift sellers often had hidden treasures. As she sorted through a pile, her fingers brushed against something soft. She pulled it out, and her heart stopped for a moment. The dress was perfect, deep blue with delicate patterns that seemed to dance in the sunlight. But more than that, it was identical to one her mother had worn in Owell's favorite photograph. She could almost hear her mother's laugh, could almost feel her warm embrace. With trembling hands, she set it aside to continue searching, already imagining wearing it on Christmas morning. Then came the argument. Another woman, taller, louder, richer, grabbed the dress. "I'll pay double," the woman announced to the seller, not even looking at Alwell. The seller's eyes lit up at the mention of more money, and just like that, the dress was gone. Alwell stood there, hurt and anger mixing in her chest, as the woman walked away with her treasure. But fate, or perhaps something darker, had other plans. When Alwell returned to the market days later, she found an identical dress at another stall. The coincidence should have seemed strange, should have raised questions. But all she could think about was her mother's smile, and how this dress could bring a piece of that back into her life. What Alwell couldn't see was the shadow that passed over the seller's face as she handed over the dress, or the way the other customers seemed to step back when she walked by with her purchase. She didn't notice how the birds fell silent as she carried it home, or how the air grew slightly colder around her. All she knew was that she had found her perfect Christmas dress, not understanding that something had also found her. Christmas Eve arrived with the warmth of family and the promise of celebration. Alwell's twin cousins, Kyoma and Kidera, filled the small hut with laughter as they helped prepare the holiday meal. They hadn't seen each other in years, but it felt as if no time had passed at all. Their father watched from his favorite chair, smiling at their joy, his eyes crinkling at the corners just like their mothers used to. "You've grown so tall," Alwell said, hugging her cousins for the 100th time that day. They shared stories late into the night, their voices growing softer as the village around them fell silent. When they finally said goodnight, Alwell touched her new dress one last time before climbing into bed, excitement for Christmas morning making her smile. But midnight brought terror instead of dreams. Alwell's eyes snapped open to complete darkness. Her body felt like stone, heavy and immobile. She tried to scream, but her voice was trapped. Something moved in the darkness, a presence she couldn't see but could feel, cold and ancient, sliding over her skin like morning mist. Hours stretched endlessly, until dawn finally broke the spell. Elle jumped from her bed, her heart thundering in her chest. "Father," she called out, running to his room. "Empty." "Kioma?" "Kidera." Their room too stood silent, bed still made as if they'd never been slept in. The village buzzed with Christmas morning activity, but Allwell's world had stopped. She ran from neighbor to neighbor, panic rising with each shake of the head, until old Ma Adana grabbed her arm. "Child," the old woman said, "I saw you last night. You walked out of your hut at midnight, and your father and cousins followed behind you like shadows." Allwell's blood ran cold. "That's not possible. I was in my bed. I couldn't move." Back in her room, the dress hung in its corner, but something had changed. Dark mud stained its hem, mud that hadn't been there the night before. As Allwell stared at it, a cold breeze whispered through the room, though all the windows were closed. And in that breeze, so faint she almost missed it, she heard something like a woman's cry. The mystery was deepening beyond her missing family. Something had taken control that night, something that wore her face and walked with her feet. And somehow, Allwell knew, the answer hung before her in the form of a simple dress that no longer seemed simple at all. As the Christmas sun climbed higher, Allwell encountered a strange old woman in the village square. The woman's eyes held ancient wisdom, and her voice carried the weight of secrets as she spoke. "Child, the answers you seek are in your own home. The dress has chosen you." Back in her room, Allwell stared at the mud-stained dress with new eyes. Her hands trembled as she slipped it on, and immediately she felt another presence within her, gentle but desperate, like a trapped bird seeking freedom. The spirit's voice came as a whisper in her mind, soft as falling leaves. "I was once like you," it said, "a woman with a family, a life, and dreams." Through the spirit's memories, Allwell saw flashes of a happy home, of children's laughter, of a loving husband. But then came the witch, a woman who had pretended to be a friend, who had listened to troubles and offered comfort, all while plotting destruction. "She gave me this dress as a gift," the spirit continued, "and Allwell felt the echo of that long-ago betrayal. The moment I put it on, my spirit was trapped, and she took my body, my life, my family. For years, I watched her live my life through the fabric of this dress, unable to move or speak, until thieves took the dress from her hut and sold it at the market." Through their shared consciousness, Allwell learned the terrible truth about her father and cousins. She saw them following what they thought was her into the witch's territory. She witnessed their transformation into trees by the witch's dark magic, their bodies now standing as silent sentinels outside the witch's home. "I tried to reach them," the spirit's voice cracked with sorrow, "but the witch's magic creates a barrier I cannot cross. When I borrowed your body last night, I tried to help them, but I couldn't break through her spells." Tears rolled down Allwell's cheeks, her own mixing with the spirit's grief. She felt the years of the spirit's loneliness, the pain of watching her family from afar, the agony of being so close yet unable to reach them. It mirrored her own fear for her father and cousins, creating a bond of shared loss and determination. "We must find a way," Allwell said aloud, her voice strengthening with resolve. "There must be a way to break her power, to save both our families." The spirit's presence warmed with hope, the first real hope she had felt in years. Together, they stood before the small mirror in Allwell's room, two souls sharing one reflection, united by loss and the fierce desire to protect those they love. The drum's mysterious appearance came with the setting sun. Allwell found the old woman waiting outside her hut, the wooden instrument cradled in her arms like a precious child. In the fading light, something familiar flickered in the woman's eyes, the same gentle wisdom that the spirit in the dress remembered from her own mother. "I am her mother," the old woman confirmed, her voice thick with years of grief. "I've watched my daughter trapped between worlds, unable to help until now." She held out the drum, its surface carved with symbols that seemed to shift in the twilight. "The witch's power comes from silence and secrets. But this drum, it speaks truth into darkness." Allwell's hand shook as she took the drum, the spirit within her dress surging with recognition and love for her mother. The old woman's eyes glistened with tears. "Go to the witch's house at midnight, where the dress, beat the drum, and let my daughter's spirit free. But be warned, the witch's power will fight back. As midnight approached, Elle walked through the forest toward the witch's house, the drum in her hands, and the spirit's presence wrapped around her like armor. The trees that were once her father and cousins stood dark and still against the star-filled sky. She could feel their life force pulsing faintly within the bark, waiting. The witch emerged from her hut at the first beat of the drum, her stolen beauty twisting into something ancient and terrible. "You dares!" she shrieked, but Elle kept beating the drum, each sound rippling through the night like waves of lightning. The drum spoke with voices of truth, the cries of a mother separated from her children, the pain of a wife torn from her husband, the agony of a daughter watching her family suffer. With each beat, the witch's power fractured. She tried to cast her spells, but the drum's rhythm shattered them before they could form. "Stop," the witch commanded, her stolen face beginning to crack like dried clay. But Allwell's hands moved faster, the spirit guiding them in a rhythm as old as grief itself. The ground trembled, and the air filled with light that poured from the drum's surface. The witch's final scream cut through the night as her form dissolved, pulled into the drum like smoke into a bottle. At that moment, the spirit flew from the dress in a burst of golden light, returning to her body that had been held captive for so long. Around them, the trees transformed back into Allwell's father and cousins, gasping as if waking from a long dream. They all stood in the clearing, two families restored, bound by a thread of shared suffering and triumph. The spirit, now flesh and blood again, embraced her mother with tears of joy. Allwell ran to her father and cousins, feeling their solid warmth, their realness, their return. "Thank you," the restored woman said to Allwell, her eyes shining with the same wisdom Allwell had first felt in the dress. "You gave me back my life, my family, my world." Dawn broke over the forest, washing away the last shadows of the witch's power. The drum and dress, their purpose fulfilled, crumbled to dust in the morning light. But the bonds forged through their magic, between mothers and daughters, between families, between souls who understood the depth of love and sacrifice, those remained, stronger than any spell. In the days that followed, the village slowly returned to normal, though normal now held a different meaning. All's family celebrated their delayed Christmas, filling their small hut with more joy and laughter than ever before. The empty chair that had long reminded them of their mother's absence felt less heavy now, warmed by new understanding of how love persists beyond loss. The woman they had helped, whose name was Adamma, like her mother, visited often, bringing small gifts and huge smiles. Her own family marveled at her return, and though they never fully understood where she had been, they understood enough to hold her closer, to listen more carefully, to love more deeply. One evening, as they all sat together sharing palm wine and stories, Adamma's mother spoke softly about trust and friendship. "The witch found her way into my daughter's life," she said, her wise eyes scanning the faces around her, "because she offered comfort when it was most needed. Sometimes the sweetest words hide the sharpest teeth." Allwell's father nodded, adding his own wisdom to the conversation. "But see how goodness finds its way. My daughter bought a dress hoping to look beautiful for Christmas. Instead, she found something far more precious, the chance to help another family heal. Everything happens for a reason," Adamma agreed, reaching out to squeeze Allwell's hand. "Even the darkest moments can lead us to light if we keep our hearts open and our spirits strong." The two families grew closer as seasons passed, their bond strengthened by their shared experience. They created new traditions together, celebrating not just Christmas but the day of their liberation, the day they had defeated darkness with truth, love, and courage. Allwell kept the dust from the magical drum in a small pouch, not for its power, but as a reminder. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, she would hold it and remember how the drum's beats had spoken truth into darkness, how they had broken chains of deceit with rhythms of love and justice. Years later, when young children would gather around to hear stories, Allwell would tell them not just about witches and magic, but about deeper truths. How to recognize true friendship, how to guard their hearts while keeping them open to love, how to trust their instincts when something feels wrong. She taught them that the strongest magic comes not from spells or potions, but from the courage to stand up for others and the wisdom to understand that every story, Even the scariest ones holds lessons worth learning. Remember, she would say, her voice carrying the weight of experience and the lightness of hope. In this life, we must choose our confidence carefully, for trust is as precious as gold. But also remember that when we help others, we often find our own healing. Every challenge we face, every fear we overcome, shapes us into who we are meant to be. And so their story lived on, whispered around fires, and shared at gatherings, teaching new generations that while evil may sometimes wear a friendly face, true friendship, tested by time and strengthened by sacrifice, can break any curse and light any darkness.